Apollo 1.
27th January 1967. Three astronauts climb into their capsule for what should be the safest part of the entire mission. Not a launch, just a routine test on the ground. Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee seal themselves inside to rehearse procedures they'll repeat on launch day, weeks from now. Here's the detail almost no one thought twice about at the time. The capsule is filled with pure oxygen, at pressure higher than normal. It was standard procedure. It had been used before, dozens of times, without incident. What nobody had fully reckoned with is what pure oxygen does inside a sealed space. It doesn't just support fire. It turns it into something almost unstoppable. A spark that would flicker out in ordinary air can become an inferno in seconds. At 6:31 p.m., that spark happens. Investigators later trace it to damaged wiring beneath Grissom's seat. The fire doesn't creep. It detonates across the cabin almost instantly. And here's the part that still unsettles people who study this case. The hatch was designed to open inward, sealed shut by the very pressure the fire is now building inside the cabin. It cannot be opened in time. Ground crew, standing just feet away, hear their crewmates and cannot reach them. In under 30 seconds, it's over. Three men are gone, on a launch pad, months before their spacecraft was ever meant to leave the ground. NASA had run this exact hatch and cabin design through over 100 successful tests. It took one unexamined risk, sitting in plain sight the entire time, to end 3 lives before the mission even began. The redesign that followed, a hatch that opens in 3 seconds instead of 90, likely saved the astronauts who flew every Apollo mission after. Vladimir Komarov, Soyuz 1. Less than 3 months later, on the other side of the world, a Soviet cosmonaut walks through the corridors of the Baikonur Cosmodrome toward a spacecraft he does not trust. His name is Vladimir Komarov, and what almost no one outside a small circle of engineers knows is this: the spacecraft waiting for him has already failed over 200 separate times during testing. The parachutes, the attitude control, the heat shield bonding. Engineers have written report after report, begging mission planners to delay. But there's a date to keep. The launch has been timed to coincide with Lenin's birthday and the May Day parade, a propaganda win the Kremlin badly needs. Safety concerns lose to a calendar. There's one more thing keeping Komarov quiet about his fear. If he refuses to fly, his backup pilot takes his place. That backup pilot is Yuri Gagarin, the first human being to ever reach space, a national hero, and Komarov's closest friend, so he says nothing. At 3:35 a.m. Moscow time, Soyuz 1 lifts into the pre-dawn dark. The trouble starts almost immediately. One of the 2 solar panels fails to deploy, cutting power generation in half. Without it, the spacecraft can't properly orient toward the sun, and the batteries begin draining fast. Then the attitude sensors, the instruments telling Komarov which way he's even facing, turn unreliable. Soyuz 1 begins tumbling, uncontrolled, through open space. For 18 orbits, he fights to stabilize his own spacecraft by hand, burning fuel reserves he can't spare. Mission Control has no choice left. They order an emergency return. For a while, it actually works. The heat shield holds. The descent proceeds normally. Then, at 23,000 feet, with the ground finally visible, the main parachute container fails to open correctly. A design flaw, flagged months earlier, never fixed. The backup chute deploys. It tangles with the first. Soviet listening posts record his final transmissions as he falls. He has less than a minute left, and he knows it. Of the more than 600 people who have since flown to space, Komarov remains the first to die during the act of spaceflight itself. His capsule hits the ground with such force that a spherical descent module, once large enough to hold a man, is flattened into a disc barely a meter high. X-15 Flight 365-97. That same year, 1967, will claim one more life at the edge of the atmosphere, though this time, almost no one remembers his name. November 15th, U.S. Air Force Major Michael J. Adams climbs into the X-15, an experimental rocket plane built to explore the boundary between air and space. It's his 7th flight in the program routine, by X-15 standards. Released from a B-52 bomber at 45,000 feet, Adams ignites the rocket engine and accelerates past 3,800 miles per hour, climbing steeply toward the edge of the sky. He reaches 266,000 feet, officially crossing into space. Somewhere near the top of the climb, the aircraft's control system starts to fail. At that altitude, the air is so thin that pilots get almost no aerodynamic feedback. Adams doesn't immediately notice the aircraft has begun drifting off course. By the time he does, the X-15 has entered a slow, developing spin, and the conventional controls are nearly useless in air that thin. As the aircraft descends into thicker atmosphere, the spin should become correctable. Instead, the angle has become so extreme that the X-15 is effectively flying sideways at over 3 times the speed of sound. At 65,000 feet, the aerodynamic forces exceed what the airframe and the human body can withstand. Subjected to more than 15 times the force of gravity, Adams likely loses consciousness before the aircraft tears apart around him. He is posthumously awarded astronaut wings, becoming the first person in history to earn them by dying in space. in a program most people have never even heard of. Soyuz 11. 4 years pass. In June 1971, 3 more Soviet cosmonauts strap into a Soyuz spacecraft, and this time, everything appears to go right. Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Patsayev dock successfully with Salyut 1, humanity's first space station, becoming the first crew to ever live aboard one. For 22 days, they run experiments, set new endurance records, and radio cheerful routine updates back to Earth. Nothing suggests danger. If anything, this looks like the mission that finally gives the Soviet space program a clean, unambiguous win. On June 29th, they seal the hatch, undock, and begin the trip home. Every system reports normal. The descent module separates as planned. The heat shield performs exactly as designed. The parachutes open correctly. The landing rockets fire on cue, cushioning touchdown in Kazakhstan. By every measurement available to mission control, it's a perfect landing. Recovery crews arrive expecting to greet 3 men who just broke the spaceflight endurance record. Instead, they open the hatch to silence. All 3 cosmonauts are still strapped into their seats, motionless. There's no crash, no fire, no visible trauma at all. The cause, investigators find, is a small pressure equalization valve designed to open just before landing that opened far too early at an altitude still above the recognized edge of space. The cabin loses its air in just over a minute. The crew has no pressure suits to protect them. Wearing them during descent isn't yet standard practice. Consciousness would have lasted only 15 to 20 seconds after the air began escaping. They survived every visible danger of spaceflight and were undone by a single valve, damaged during a routine separation that no one on board could see, hear, or reach. The Challenger disaster. 15 years later, on the morning of January 28, 1986, millions of people tune in to watch a launch that feels different from the others. Aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger is Krista McAuliffe, a high school teacher from New Hampshire, selected to become the first ordinary citizen to fly to space. School children across America are watching live, including her own students from their classroom. The night before, engineers at the company that built the shuttle's rocket boosters noticed something troubling. Overnight temperatures have dropped to 18 degrees Fahrenheit, far colder than the rubber O-ring seals in the boosters have ever been tested to handle. 2 senior engineers push hard to delay the launch. They're overruled after a tense argument that stretches past midnight. At 11:38 a.m., Challenger lifts off into a clear, cold sky. For 59 seconds, it looks flawless. Then the cameras catch it, a small flame, flickering exactly where the engineers warned it might appear. It grows. It burns through the metal strut holding the booster to the external fuel tank. At 72 seconds, the tank ruptures, and thousands of gallons of liquid propellant ignite in a fireball, visible for miles. Here's what most people don't realize. The explosion itself doesn't kill the crew. The crew compartment, built to withstand enormous stress, is thrown clear intact and falls toward the ocean for nearly 3 minutes, reaching speeds over 200 miles per hour before impact. Emergency oxygen packs had been activated. At least one voice was captured on the flight recorder after the breakup began. There's no way to slow the fall, no way to undo what's already set in motion. 72 seconds after a clear blue morning began, the crew compartment strikes the Atlantic Ocean at over 200 miles per hour. The impact is unsurvivable, instant, for anyone who was still alive during the fall. Search ships spend weeks combing the ocean floor off the coast of Florida, recovering wreckage piece by piece from the seabed. It takes nearly 2 months before all 7 crew members are recovered and identified. The Columbia disaster. 17 years later, another shuttle crew will die from a danger that was seen and dismissed before it ever turned fatal. January 16, 2003, Space Shuttle Columbia launches, carrying 7 astronauts on a 16-day science mission. 81 seconds into the flight, a chunk of foam insulation, smaller than a briefcase, weighing under 2 pounds, breaks off the external fuel tank and strikes the leading edge of the left wing. Engineers review the footage. It looks serious enough that a debris assessment team formally requests satellite images to check for damage. The request is denied. Program managers reason that even if there is damage, Columbia has no way to repair it in orbit, so there's nothing to be gained by knowing for certain. For 16 days, the crew runs their experiments, unaware their spacecraft is carrying a hole in its wing roughly the size of a basketball. On February 1st, Columbia begins its descent home. As it hits the thicker layers of the atmosphere, superheated plasma, well over 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, pours through that hole and begins melting the wing's internal structure from the inside out. Sensors on the left side of the shuttle start failing, one after another. The crew has no idea why. At over 200,000 feet, traveling more than 17 times the speed of sound, the wing separates from the fuselage. The shuttle breaks apart over Texas within seconds. In 60 years of human spaceflight, only 18 people have ever died during ascent or descent. Columbia's 7 are among them, lost to a 2-pound piece of foam, and a question nobody was allowed to ask twice. Wreckage rains down across 2 states, and search teams spend months combing forests and fields, recovering debris scattered over hundreds of miles. NASA grounded the shuttle program once again, and from that point on, every mission carried a strict rule. Any damage, no matter how small, gets checked. It was the second time a warning had been ignored, and the second time it cost an entire crew everything. If this kept you hooked, hit subscribe. History's full of stories like these, and we're just getting started.